Adolf Hitler neither finished school nor had any vocational training. He occasionally lived in homeless shelters or on the street. He refused to pursue a regular job. To this day, it seems inexplicable that he could come to power. Out of nowhere, Hitler became the Führer, leader of the German Reich, one of the most powerful men of the 20th century who brought the world to the brink of disaster and death to millions of people. The nation worshipped him and followed him blindly into the abyss. But during his lifetime, he kept his origins and his life secret. No one should know how or who he was. Hitler's contemporaries, from his birth to his death, flesh out the picture. Who was Hitler?
On June the 30th, 1903, the 72-year-old Kaiser Franz Josef I visits Braunau am Inn to celebrate its 700th birthday. An historical coincidence. This border town to Bavaria, of all places, is the origin of the oldest film footage shot by an Austrian cinematographer.
In the late 80s of the last century, my parents lived in this small town on the Inn, which is Bavarian by blood and Austrian by nationality. Adolf Hitler, Mein Kampf.
The customs inspector Alois Hitler and his family occupy a small apartment on the top floor of the Pommer Hotel in Braunau. At Easter time on April the 20th, 1889, at about 6:30 in the evening, Adolf Hitler is born.
Parish Register, Braunau. Adolphus Hitler, born on April the 20th, 1889, at 6:30 in the evening. Baptized on April the 22nd at 3:15 by Ignaz Probst.
To begin with, there is this picture of little Adolf from the year 1889, a few months after his birth. One thing worthy of note in this first picture of Hitler is the close resemblance of Adolf to his mother. August Kubizek, childhood friend of Adolf Hitler.
Adolf Hitler is the third of the couple's 6 children. He and his younger sister Paula are the only ones to survive beyond childhood. The mother is 28 years old at the time of the birth. The father is 51. Clara Hitler is related to Alois Hitler. She's her husband's second cousin. When Hitler is 3 years old, his father is transferred to a new post and decides to move into an apartment in Passau on the German side of the border. Adolf Hitler lives with his family in Bavaria for 3 years, until 1895.
Actually, Hitler didn't speak a typical Austrian dialect. August Kubizek.
In my youth, my German was the dialect spoken in Lower Bavaria. Adolf Hitler, Mein Kampf.
The oldest film recording made in Austria-Hungary was shot by foreigners, the Lumiere brothers. It shows Vienna, the capital of a multinational empire, in the year 1896.
In old Austria, you could travel without a passport, from the Mediterranean, over the Alps, way into the east, the west, and the north. Oskar Kokoschka, painter and writer.
Hitler's ancestry from Lower Austria, as well as a total of 21 years spent in Upper Austria and Vienna, do not suffice to make him Austrian in the sense of a citizen of that nation.
Kurt Schuschnigg, Austrian Chancellor from 1934 to 1938. Austrians who spoke about the nation before 1938 meant the national culture that extended beyond their borders, which is what Austrian man also identified with.
This cultural nation is Germany. Transporting a locomotive through the streets of Chemnitz, 16 workhorses pull the locomotive as the factory has no rail connection. The majority of German-speaking Austrians feel close links to the Germans in Prussia, Saxony, Bavaria, and the smaller federal states already united in a partly industrialized Reich.
He was a grumpy, reticent old man, and, like a lot of political free spirits at the time, a stern German nationalist. Joseph Meyerhofer, farmer in the village of Leonding by Linz.
A visit to his parents' grave. His school friends say his mother was loving and kind-hearted. The father cold, silent and strict. Josef Goebbels, diary, July 22nd, 1938.
I never loved my father, but feared him all the more. Adolf Hitler, Table Talk, recorded by his secretary, Christa Schröder.
My brother Adolf provoked my father to such extremes that he was beaten every day. Paula Hitler, later Paula Wolf.
In June 1939, Eva Braun films the small farm in the village of Haarfeld in Upper Austria that Hitler's father leases after retiring early in 1895. On May 1, 1895, Hitler starts school in a one-room schoolhouse in the neighbouring village of Fischelham. In the year 1897, Hitler's father sells the farm in Haarfeld. The family lives temporarily in the small town of Lambach. In 1898, the Hitler family moves to the village of Leonding near Linz. Here, Hitler's father buys property number 61, including 1,900 square meters of land. After 5 years at elementary school, in 1900, Adolf Hitler, aged 11, begins secondary school in the city of Linz. Adolf Hitler has to repeat his first year at secondary school due to poor grades.
I remember the scrawny, pale boy who commuted every day between Linz and Leonding fairly well. He was definitely talented on the one hand, but was not in control of himself. He was considered rebellious, and he didn't work hard. Dr. Eduard Hümer, Hitler's French teacher.
The quiet life enjoyed by the Hitler family on its little patch of land only lasted a few years. The head of the family died unexpectedly of a heart attack in January 1903. Max Sixtel, Leonding, the Führer's hometown.
Alois Hitler leaves his modest savings to his 4 surviving children, Alois and Angela from the second of his 3 marriages, and Adolf and Paula. This inheritance is to be paid out when they come of age.
The quiet cemetery of Leonding was his final resting place. His widow moved to the nearby city of Linz for the better educational opportunities for her children. Max Zixtel.
In 1904, Clara Hitler has to send her son Adolf, who due to bad grades is again in danger of not moving upper class, to the state secondary school in Steyr, 40 kilometers away.
Look at my school grades. I had bad marks in German. That idiot of a professor spoiled the German language for me. I would never be able to write a proper letter.
Adolf Hitler, in the Führer's headquarters, 1943.
Last grades at secondary school in Steyr. Diligence, inconsistent. German, insufficient. Geography and history, sufficient. Mathematics, insufficient. Physics, satisfactory. Freehand drawing, commendable. Sport, excellent.
I don't have a photograph of Adolf Hitler during the years of our friendship. There probably aren't any photos of Hitler during this period. Everything that could be said about images of Hitler as a young man has already been said, were it not for the drawing by a classmate from the 4th grade of the junior high school in Steyr. By chance, this drawing, done in 1905, was preserved. The boy could only draw profiles. Nevertheless, there is something peculiarly fascinating about this pencil sketch. August Kubitschek.
After 9 years, Adolf Hitler finishes school without graduating. For the following 3 years, he lives in Linz on his mother's pension, not really doing anything.
All of his relatives considered him worthless, a person who shied away from any gainful employment from the start. August Kubitschek.
Adolf Hitler talks his mother into allowing him to travel to Vienna. He wants to apply for admission to the general painting class at the Academy of Fine Arts.
From early in the morning to late at night, I ran from one sightseeing attraction to the next. But the buildings were the only things that fascinated me. All of Ring Street affected me like a spell from the Arabian Nights.
Adolf Hitler, Mein Kampf.
From 1904 to 1908, I was Adolf Hitler's only friend in Linz, and thereafter in Vienna. August Kubitschek.
Hitler, who later, in the opinion of a few art experts, was not entirely untalented, manages to pass the first selection, but is turned down after the second.
Adolf Hitler, born in Braunau, Upper Austria, on April the 20th, 1889. German, Catholic, few faces, test drawing unsatisfactory. Classification list of the general painting class.
When Adolf Hitler, disappointed by the rejection, returns to his family in Linz after 8 weeks, Clara Hitler is struck down with a serious illness. She's suffering from a swelling. Nowadays, it would be diagnosed as cancer. For several months, Adolf Hitler devotedly takes care of his mother at home.
Dr. Bloch, well loved by all, was the Hitler family physician. August Kubitschek.
To a great degree, the boy lived in his own world. I have no idea what dreams he dreamt. Dr. Edward Bloch, Jewish physician of the Hitler family.
Clara Hitler dies in the night of December the 21st, 1907, surrounded by her family.
The death of our mother had a great effect on me and Adolf. We were very attached to our mother. When she died, Adolf stopped coming home. Paula Hitler, Adolf Hitler's sister.
In contrast to what Hitler's sister Paula claims later, Adolf Hitler remains in Linz several weeks after the death of his mother. He never tells his family or his friend Kubitschek that he failed the admissions test the previous year.
Apparently, he was having some really bad days. He was easily irritated and gave me short shrift when I started to talk about my studies. August Kubitschek.
In the spring of 1908, Adolf Hitler begins living the life of a wastrel in the metropolis.
Vienna was the most thorough education of my life.
Adolf Hitler, Mein Kampf.
The small inheritance that was diligently managed by his guardian had to cover both the cost of living and his studies. He may have been able to supplement his income through the sale of drawings and paintings. August Kubitschek.
For the next months, there is no trace of Hitler's activities in Vienna. He's broken off contact with his family, and he fails the second entrance test at the Art Academy. He begins to copy street views of Vienna from books, and then sells them as postcards.
I was a young, inexperienced man, without any means of support. Forced to get by on my own, the few kronen, often only cents, from the proceeds of my work were barely enough to pay for my bed and board.
Adolf Hitler, Mein Kampf.
Hitler's share of his father's inheritance is paid out on April the 20th, 1913, his 24th birthday. Hitler met Rudolf Häusler in a men's hostel. With him, he wants to move to the German city of Munich.
He was just full of praise for this city, and at the same time he didn't forget the large beer gardens and radishes, etc. Housemate of Hitler's in 1912.
I had arrived in this town as a boy and departed as a quiet and serious man.
Adolf Hitler, Mein Kampf.
The main reason for leaving Austria is probably that the later Commander-in-Chief Adolf Hitler wants to get out of doing military service. On Saturday, May the 24th, 1913, Hitler and Häusler give notice of departure to the police, but don't state where they plan to live. In Munich, Adolf Hitler has found the city that is to become the centre of his life. He does, however, remain an outsider. His inheritance helps him build an uncertain yet adequate existence on the fringe of society.
It was a beautiful Sunday afternoon in spring. Someone knocked on the door and I answered it. It was a young man wanting to see the room we were renting. I showed it to him and we reached an agreement. Frau Anna Popp, landlady, Schleißheimer Straße 34.
Adolf Hitler and Rudolf Häusler rent a room together from the tailor Popp at 34 Schleißheimer Straße, near the district of Schwabing.
The younger generation that we belonged to didn't know anything about war, but were intoxicated by foreign wars. We had no real idea what war was. Adolf's father had never been a soldier. Now and again, old men would talk about Königgrätz and Kostotze. August Kubitschek.
Diary, Monday, June the 29th, 1914. Archduke Franz Ferdinand, the heir apparent to the Austrian throne, has been killed along with his wife. The scum of moral turpitude. Henrietta Schneider, born 1872, housekeeper, East Prussia.
The incident triggers a war in the Balkans that grows to become a world war.
For me, those hours were a release from the annoying emotions of youth. I'm not ashamed to say today that I was overwhelmed with enthusiasm, fell to my knees and thanked the heavens with all my heart that they had given me the good fortune to live in this era. Adolf Hitler, Mein Kampf.
On August 2nd, 1914, the day after Germany declares war on Russia, there is a big patriotic rally on Odeonsplatz in front of the Feldherrn Hall. Heinrich Hoffmann photographs the ceremony. Years later, in an enlargement, he discovers a face among the masses, which is presumably Hitler's.
On August the 5th, 1914, I enlisted in the army on a request to His Majesty and entered the 1st Bavarian Infantry Regiment. I was deferred for several days, then transferred to the 2nd Infantry Regiment, and finally assigned to the Bavarian Reserve Infantry Regiment No. 16 on August the 16th. Adolf Hitler, outline of my person.
For the first time in his life, Adolf Hitler wears a uniform. In the early morning hours of October the 21st, 1914, Hitler's regiment sets out from Munich station in a westerly direction. Shortly after the first combat mission of the List Regiment, Hitler is promoted to Lance Corporal. He will reject further promotions during the course of the war. This would have involved an attachment to other army units, and Hitler would have lost the camaraderie and security of the regimental family.
For the first time, Hitler was part of a bigger community, and with that came the order and structure that spared him the daily struggle to survive. Fritz Wiedemann, Lieutenant.
As of November the 9th, Hitler is deployed as a dispatch runner and assigned to the regimental staff. In the eyes of many soldiers in the trenches, the staff orderlies behind the immediate front are privileged cowards.
Whenever death was on the prowl, a certain something attempted to rebel and appeared to the weak body in the guise of reason, and was in fact only cowardice that was behind this disguise, trying to seduce the individual. By the winter of 1915-16, this battle was already decided for me. The will itself had finally become my complete master. Now fate could put me to the test without me losing my nerves. A young war volunteer had become an old soldier. Adolf Hitler, Mein Kampf.
Hitler is respected by his comrades at regimental headquarters, but he remains an outsider. In 5 of 6 photos showing Hitler with his comrades, he's either standing or sitting to one side. Hitler is wounded by British artillery shrapnel on October the 5th, 1916, and is taken to the Red Cross Hospital in Belitz, south of Berlin. By March the 1st, 1917, he's back running dispatches in the regimental staff. In the following months, he participates in combat activities. On August the 4th, 1918, Hitler is awarded the Iron Cross First Class, the highest military honour that soldiers of his rank in the Imperial German Army can receive. The nomination was submitted by a Jewish officer, Lieutenant Hugo Gutmann.
I never got out of Hitler the reason for his fanatical hatred of Jews. The experience with Jewish officers during the World War couldn't have contributed to this. Fritz Wiedemann, Lieutenant.
In the night of October the 13th, Hitler's war service ends in a heavy British barrage.
Mustard gas was used. On a hill south of the city of Wervik, on October the 13th, we came under several hours of artillery fire with gas shells. Already around midnight, some of us dropped out, including some comrades, permanently. In the morning, I too experienced pain that grew stronger every 15 minutes. And at 7 o'clock, I staggered and stumbled back with burning eyes, taking my last message of the war with me. Adolf Hitler, Mein Kampf.
After treatment in a mobile army hospital, Adolf Hitler is transported to the Prussian Reserve Hospital in Pasewalk, Western Pomerania. He's been on the front for 42 of the 51 months of the war. Hitler remains in Pasewalk for 28 days, during which the world changes. In the military hospital in Pasewalk, Adolf Hitler and the other patients learn that a revolution has taken place, the monarchy abdicated, and a ceasefire been concluded.
I hadn't cried since the day I stood by my mother's grave. Now, I couldn't stop myself. Adolf Hitler, Mein Kampf.
Like everything else in Mein Kampf, this portrayal is a stylization and must be doubted. We don't know whether it was Hitler's will or merely coincidence that influenced his future course from then on. On November the 21st, 1918, Adolf Hitler returns to Munich. He tries to evade demobilization and remain a soldier. There are clashes between supporters of the workers' councils and parliamentary democracy in the state capital. The Social Democratic majority allows right-wing volunteer groups, the so-called Free Corps, to break the power of the workers' councils.
Letter to Clara and Fritz Hess. The volunteer corps made an excellent impression. Without them, we would have been finished in Bavaria. Rudolf Hess, student and member of the Free Corps.
Adolf Hitler keeps his distance to the revolutionary forces, but also to their right-wing opponents. During this period, Hitler grows more radical. He is under the influence of army officers like Karl Mayr, the head of the intelligence battalion.
When I met him for the first time, he came across as a tired stray dog looking for an owner. Karl Mayr, captain of the Reichswehr.
Karl Mayr also finances patriotic parties like the Deutsche Arbeiterpartei, the German Workers' Party, which is founded in Munich on January the 5th, 1919, mainly by a group of railwaymen. On September the 12th, 1919, Hitler, who has in the meantime been demobbed, is sent to spy on the German Workers' Party by Myra, who also provides financial support.
During the discussion, a professor spoke about separatist views. A second speaker then took the floor and, in short, powerful words, demolished the professor. It was Adolf Hitler. Michael Lotter, secretary of the German Workers' Party.
One day, I had the opportunity to talk to a large audience, and what I had always instinctively felt without knowing it turned out to be true. I could speak in public.
Adolf Hitler, Mein Kampf.
In the second half of September 1919, Hitler joins the German Workers' Party and participates regularly in its meetings.
Among the various right-wing radical organizations, the NSDAP was by no means the strongest, but it was the most active and cohesive group. Its significance is solely the result of the effect of Hitler as a speaker. Ernst Hanfstaengl, son of a publisher, acquaintance of Adolf Hitler from 1920.
On February the 24th, 1920, Hitler speaks for the first time in front of more than 1,000 people at the Hofbräuhaus. He also announces the 25-point party programme, which is formally valid for a quarter of a century until the demise of the NSDAP.
First, we demand the unification of all Germans in a greater Germany based on the right of self-determination of the people. Second, we demand equal rights for the German people in respect to other nations and the abrogation of the peace treaties of Versailles and Saint-Germain. Third, we demand land and territory for the sustenance of our people and settlement of our surplus population. Fourth, only a national comrade can be a citizen. Only those of German blood can be national comrades, regardless of creed. Consequently, no Jew can be a national comrade.
A few days later, they changed their name from the German Workers' Party to the National Socialist German Workers' Party, or NSDAP.
Hitler was the party, and the party was Hitler. Ernst Hanfstaengl.
Because right now, here in Munich, a movement is starting so strong that all young, powerful, and healthy forces are attracted to it. It is the National Socialist German Workers' Party. To make it absolutely clear, we're anti-Semites. Ilse Pröll, later Ilse Hess, from 1921, member of the NSDAP. Letter to her former college teacher.
When the first party congress is held, the Augsburg essay is well represented. At this first public presentation, I get the impression that this has substance. We are not alone. The idea of the fatherland is growing. Karl Wahl, Augsburg, former SA member.
The German economy collapses. In August 1923, hyperinflation sets in.
Everything is getting worse. Famine. A loaf of bread, 140 billion. Then reduced again to 80 billion. Famine, famine everywhere. Käthe Kollwitz, painter and sculptress.
The national associations overestimate their own strength and believe that parliamentary democracy is at an end.
Interview with the Daily Mail newspaper, October the 2nd, 1923. If a Mussolini were to appear in Germany, then the people would fall on their knees and worship him more than Mussolini has ever been worshipped.
Adolf Hitler.
A large revolt from the right in Bavaria with Ludendorff at its head. Henrietta Schneider, District Elk, East Prussia.
Report of the Regional Government of Upper Bavaria, Munich, November the 9th, 1923. The day before yesterday, Hitler promised General von Lossow and Colonel von Seizure personally that he would not undertake anything. The answer to this word of honor was given last night when, with pistol in hand, Hitler extorted a declaration in favor of a national dictatorship from General State Commissioner von Kahr, General von Lossow, and Colonel von Seizure. At the same time, the ministers present were taken into custody by Hitler's people.
Hitler presents his suggestions for new governments in Berlin and Munich and mentions Erich Ludendorff as Führer and chief with dictatorial power over the German National Army. He asks the already drunken audience,
"Do you accept this solution for the German question, of a greater German state?"
Then, as the crowd shouts its agreement, Hitler proclaims,
"Morning will either find us with a national government in Germany or find us dead."
The revolt is intended to put Munich and Bavaria in the hands of the revolutionaries, and then with a march on Berlin to topple the democratic system. The Putschists are counting on defections from the army in Bavaria and the Bavarian police. These, however, fail to materialize. On the morning of November the 10th, 2,000 revolutionaries, some armed, marched from the Bürgerbräu beer hall through the centre of town to Ludwigstrasse at Odeonsplatz. 10 years later, Munich, November the 9th, 1933. Amateur film of a tradition that actually dates from the year of the Seizure of Power, the annual march of the old fighters of the NSDAP to the Feldherrnhalle. Leading the column, as in 1923, are Adolf Hitler and Hermann Göring.
We retreated to Café Stephanie. People soon came in and said there had been a skirmish on the Odeonsplatz, and the enormous crowd of Hitler men turned and ran away from the state police. Oskar Maria Graf, writer, From My Life.
On November the 12th, 1923, Adolf Hitler is sent to the fortress prison in Landsberg. He is given cell number 7. The leaders of the Putsch are put on trial for high treason in the main lecture theatre of the Central War School on February the 26th, 1924.
Report of the Württemberg Emissary, March the 13th, 1924. I attended one of the hearings myself, and I was upset to see how the observers, who you could clearly see were mostly from circles close to Hitler, used every opportunity to show their support for the accused. Karl Moser von Vilseck.
Letter to Clara and Fritz Hess. Hitler's final statement enclosed. It is one of the best, most powerful speeches that he has ever given. Even those in the courtroom who weren't particularly friendly to Hitler were deeply moved. Rudolf Hess, student.
The verdict is handed down on April the 1st, 1924. All of the accused, with the exception of Ludendorff, are found guilty. In his 13 months in Landsberg prison, Adolf Hitler begins the transcript of a manifesto that portrays his alleged journey through life and his development as a politician, and sets out his worldview.
So I decided not only to clarify the goals of our movement, but also to draw a picture of its development. With that, I also had the chance to give a representation of my own development.
Adolf Hitler, foreword to Mein Kampf.
The biographical parts of his book are to a great extent exaggerated and unverified. However, his political goals are deadly serious. His view of the world is voluntaristic. He sees it as he wants to see it. Hitler's political gospel is derived from a primitive Darwinian idea of a struggle for existence. It reflects the permanent fight for survival of all against all, transferred from nature to human society. This struggle is, in his view, a selection process in which so-called high-quality races have a better chance of survival. At its head is supposedly a white person of the Nordic race of Aryans, the founders of culture. Like most anti-Semites before him, Hitler believes in a Jewish race, disguised as a religious community. He sees Jews in history as being parasites in the bodies of other nations, and as contaminators of the blood of the Aryan race.
For hours, the black-haired Jew boy waits to ambush the unsuspecting girl whom he pollutes with his blood and thus steals her from her people. With the same hidden agenda, destroying the hated white race with the inevitable resulting bastardization.
Adolf Hitler, Mein Kampf.
In another chapter, Hitler drafts plans for territorial living space for his Aryan German people.
We are stopping the endless German movement southwards and turning our gaze towards the land in the east. If today we speak of new land in Europe, we can primarily only have in mind Russia and her vassal border states.
Adolf Hitler, Mein Kampf.
Diary, January the 14th, 1925. At the end of the month, Hitler wants to call for the re-establishment of the National Socialist German Workers' Party. The only thing to do. Joseph Goebbels.
Hitler's remaining sentence of 3 years, 333 days, 21 hours and 50 minutes is waived according to the pedantically exact court records. On February the 27th, 1925, Hitler re-establishes the party. In the first round of elections for German president on March the 29th, 1925, Erich Ludendorff is the candidate of the NSDAP and other nationalistic groups. He only receives 1.1% of the votes. When Paul von Hindenburg enters the race in the second round of voting, Hitler orders his party to support the aging 77-year-old army general. Hitler and Ludendorff go separate ways. Hitler is now the sole leader of the national camp.
Diary, April the 26th, 1925. Hindenburg elected. Is he the man that Germany needs at this time? Is he not too old? Too easy to influence? Bella Fromm, German Jewish journalist.
From 1924 onwards, the German economy recovers. This leads to the 5 golden years of the Weimar Republic.
Looking back on it now, I see the mad whirl of this Berlin of 1928 and 29 as a kind of Pompeian revel on the eve of the Vesuvian eruption. Sefton Delmer, correspondent of the Daily Express in Berlin.
The Nazis hated culture itself because it is essentially international and therefore subversive of nationalism. Christopher Isherwood, British-American writer.
In the 1920s, Berlin was ahead of everything that was known as new in our field. It had everything. Reinhardt's great theatre, great film studios, great films. The most beautiful bars and restaurants, including gay bars. Berlin was productive and rich with ideas, rich in ideals, and at the same time practical, a combination never achieved before. Marlene Dietrich, actress and singer, memoirs.
Art was no longer a mere ornament of life, but rather its immediate expression. Cubism, futurism, expressionism, whatever you want to call it, this is how we were. This was our world. So shaken and shocked that everything was upside down. Surrealism? Of course, what else? Vicky Baum, writer and journalist.
Despite the lack of political success, the party stages spectacular rallies, first in Munich and Weimar, then from 1927 onwards, exclusively in Nuremberg.
Diary, Nuremberg, August the 4th, 1929. A stampede of people that exceeds our wildest hopes. Outside, the drums are already booming. Torchlight processions, endlessly long. Joseph Goebbels, NSDAP leader of Berlin.
The party conventions are, without question, Hitler's personal work. Just as he was involved in building the SA, from the smallest details of the uniforms to the color of the collar patches, he concerned himself with the planning of the party conventions, right down to the decorations in the Congress Hall. Albert Krebs, NSDAP leader, Hamburg.
Through the city, a triumphant procession. Everyone cheering and throwing flowers. March past, almost 4 hours. A sea of joy and flowers. Joseph Goebbels, diary.
The continuing fragmentation of the party landscape is advantageous for the rise of the NSDAP. In elections, they win more and more support from the splinter and protest parties. After imprisonment in Landsberg, Hitler becomes the sole leader of the nationalist movement. He feels chosen by destiny to show Germany the way to national salvation. Although the party remains unsuccessful at the polls and membership increases only slowly, the personality cult around Hitler is growing. This Führer cult holds the National Socialist movement together across ideological divisions and personal differences. Between 1925 and 1929, Hitler's small political movement is marked by activism, dynamism, enthusiasm, youthfulness and strength. Nearly 60% of new party members are under 30 years old.
Street processions, press promotions, propaganda tours into the provinces created an atmosphere of activism and tension. There were countless clashes and wounded people, even dead people, left in the square. Horst Wessel, autobiography.
In February 1930, one of the casualties will be the Berlin student Horst Wessel.
Durch Fleiß, durch Lernen und ich kann sagen durch Hungern. Langsam durch den Versailler Vertrag planmäßig eingeleitete Gespenst des asiatischen Bolschewismus. Und ich fasste damals den Entschluss, größere Erkenntnis zu überwinden.
On November the 16th, 1928, for the first time after the ban on public speaking in Prussia has been lifted, Hitler speaks in the Sportpalast in Berlin, allegedly in front of 18,000 supporters. For the first time, he uses an electroacoustic sound system, speaking into a microphone. And for the first time, his words are clearly understood in every corner of a large space.
Sieg oder Niederlage, der Mittelstand verelendet, die Finanzen, also ist es typisch deutsch, 30 Parteien zu besitzen.
Adolf Hitler neither finished school nor had any vocational training. He occasionally lived in homeless shelters or on the street. He refused to pursue a regular job. To this day, it seems inexplicable that he could come to power. Out of nowhere, Hitler became the Führer, leader of the German Reich, one of the most powerful men of the 20th century, who brought the world to the brink of disaster and death to millions of people. The nation worshipped him and followed him blindly into the abyss. But during his lifetime, he kept his origins and his life secret. No one should know how or who he was. Hitler's contemporaries, from his birth to his death, flesh out the picture. Who was Hitler?
October 1929. Angry autumn after a beautiful summer. Rain and calm weather, and something suffocating in the air. And it wasn't the weather. For the first time on the street, manure-brown uniforms. Sebastian Hafner, journalist, memoirs.
The SPD had won the German elections of 1928 and since then led a coalition government with the middle-class people's parties. This falls apart 1 year after the death of the Liberal foreign minister over domestic policy differences. In 1930, Chancellor Brüning convinces President von Hindenburg to dissolve Parliament and call for new elections 24 months early. Brüning is determined to govern with the help of the President, if necessary, without a majority.
National Socialists were now sitting in Parliament. The rise of the party could no longer be overlooked. Ernst Niekisch, National Bolshevist, Hitler opponent.
Following the example of Italy, at the end of the 1920s, movements which are called fascist are gaining strength all over Europe. In some Eastern European states, dictatorial governments rely on the support of such factions. A union of fascists is also established in the UK. A party demonstration in Manchester in 1934.
Sir Oswald Mosley, founder, British Union of Fascists. In 1930, unemployment had increased to 3,076,000, and the National Socialists then increased their MPs to 108, with a vote of 18%. Less than 3 years later, the National Socialist Party came to power. Unemployment had risen to 6,014,000.
New Year's Order, December the 31st, 1931. The army of brown shirts has multiplied numerous times. The movement has suffered a great deal of blood sacrifice. Comrades, at the beginning of this year, I thank you for everything that you accomplished over the past year through dedicated work and self-sacrificing battles. You can enter the new year with joyful confidence, proud of what you achieved in the year 1931. Adolf Hitler.
After an internal party discussion in Munich on February the 2nd, Adolf Hitler decides to run in the first round of voting in the German presidential elections of March 1932.
Diary, Berlin, February the 16th, 1932. What a strange country in which the presidency must be decided between Thälmann, Hitler or Hindenburg. Thea Sternheim, art collector and author.
Again, it was the politics of toleration when the SPD asked its voters to vote for Hindenburg, and how faithfully they followed. Golo Mann, son of Thomas and Katja Mann.
Diary, Monday, February the 29th, 1932. Who will win? Henriette Schneider, housekeeper.
Election campaign flight, April 1932. Soon Hitler had sunk into morose apathy. He just sat there, staring gloomily out of the window, wads of cotton in his ears. A complete contrast to the glad-hand extrovert man at Tempelhof. As the door of the aircraft was flung open, Hitler ducked out and immediately threw himself into his Führer pose. There he stood, bareheaded, upright and unsmiling, his hand raised in greeting. Sefton Delmer, British correspondent of the Daily Express in Berlin.
Diary, Weimar, April the 10th, 1932, Sunday. Second round of voting in German presidential election. Hindenburg finally elected over Hitler. Harry Graf Kessler, publicist and diplomat.
In June 1932, Franz von Papen, on behalf of Reich President von Hindenburg, forms a right-wing conservative cabinet, which is without a majority in parliament. The new chancellor hopes for the support of Hitler and, according to Hitler's demand, asks the Reich President to call new parliamentary elections on July the 31st.
Diary, May the 31st, 1932. Lotte is coming on Sunday. She's planning a trip with Karl to Westerland. Yesterday, Brüning resigned. Now what? Henriette Schneider.
The hero of Tannenberg, the hero of the German Republic, had a dull spirit, our grumpy field marshal with his robust conscience. With truly Germanic blind loyalty, he betrayed the pious chancellor to whom he owed his power. Brüning was fired. His successor, the comparatively liberal General von Schleicher, was soon the target of wild intrigue. Klaus Mann, son of Katja and Thomas Mann.
For far too long, we had been content with laughing and joking about the house painter Hitler. Karl Zuckmayer, German-Austrian dramatist.
Diary, Sunday, July the 31st, 1932. The hatred of the parties is awful. At 10 o'clock, the elections begin, without Wilhelm. He is plagued with neuralgia. Henriette Schneider.
The triumph of the National Socialists in the July elections of 1932 is a Pyrrhic victory.
Diary, August the 1st, 1932. Election results. We have gained a little ground. Marxism has gained a great deal. Now we have to seize power and wipe out Marxism. Either way. Hitler is also of this opinion. We won't get an absolute majority this way. Joseph Goebbels.
As almost all the major parties in the Reichstag want to bring down von Papen's government, Reich President von Hindenburg dissolves the newly elected parliament in September and calls new elections for November the 6th, 1932.
In the German elections of November 1932, the NSDAP won 11.75 million votes, the SPD 7.25 million, and the KPD some 6 million. So together, both workers' parties were a lot stronger than the Nazis. Mannes Sperber, Austrian writer and KPD member at the time.
Many leftists believed that Hitler would never recover from this setback and had ceased to be a menace. Christopher Isherwood, British-American writer.
January the 1st, 1933. Hitler was in a good mood that evening and talkative, like in the old days. Before he left, he added to his entry in the guest book,
"On the first day of the new year."
Then he looked at me and said, with suppressed excitement,
"This year belongs to us."
Ernst Hanfstaengl, head of the NSDAP Foreign Press Bureau.
After Hindenburg had decided against Chancellor Brüning, the president turned his attention to the forces of the great agrarian heavy industry coalition that operated with Hitler against Brüning, his natural allies. He took their view of Hitler. The reconstruction and further expansion of the great agrarian and heavy industry positions of power was to be taken forward. But the power was not to be transferred to the National Socialism. Ernst Niekisch, journalist, National Bolshevist.
Diary, Monday, January the 30th, 1933. Elsa came back from school with the cry, "Heil Hitler!" Then we knew Hitler had become German Chancellor at last. Henriette Schneider.
A fragment of film produced using an early Agfa colour film process. It shows thousands of extras recreating the torchlight procession through the Brandenburg Gate. It is supposed to remind viewers of January the 30th, 1933.
That the Nazis are enemies, enemies for me and for everything dear to me, I was not for a moment mistaken about that. Where I was completely mistaken was how terrible an enemy they would become. Sebastian Haffner.
The majority of his ministers were members of the German National People's Party. He utterly despised the party and was convinced that he would one day be able to rid himself of them. To be able to carry this out, he set one condition to which the German president also agreed. He wanted the power to order new elections. Ernst Niekisch.
Speech in the Berlin Sportpalast, February the 10th, 1933. I cannot divest myself of my faith in my people and stand firmly by the conviction that the hour will come at last when the millions who curse us today will stand by us, and with us will hail the new, hard-won and painfully acquired German nation that we have created together, the new German Reich of greatness and power and glory and justice. Amen. Adolf Hitler, Reich Chancellor.
The Reichstag elections of March the 5th are the last more or less free elections in the German Reich. On the streets, dissidents are terrorized by the SA.
The terror that was felt everywhere interfered, of course, with free elections, but it influenced the results only slightly. Mannes Sperber.
In the elections, the NSDAP profits from the high turnout of 88.8%, gaining 43.9%. It has to form a coalition with the German National People's Party. But the majority of Germans don't want a parliamentary democracy either. The democratic parties remain clearly in the minority, because 12.3% of the voters cast their votes for the communists.
March the 12th, 1933. Press dispatch. The office of the Reichstag sent the newly elected members an invitation to the opening session. According to a directive, the communist members of the assembly were not sent an invitation. Vossische Zeitung newspaper.
Die Reichsregierung beabsichtigt daher nicht, durch dieses Ermächtigungsgesetz die Länder aufzuheben.
2 days later, I was sitting in the Kroll Opera House, not as a Reichstag deputy. I was an observer, and on March the 23rd, 1933, I witnessed the Reichstag session in which the Enabling Act was passed by 441 votes to 94. Arthur Axmann, member of the leadership of the Hitler Youth.
und der sich mit ihm verbrüdenden anderen Organisationen ändert dies nichts.
With the so-called Enabling Act, Hitler demands extraordinary powers for himself and his government, thus paving the way for a dictatorship.
The Social Democrats were the only members to vote against the Enabling Act. But despite my conviction that the Social Democrats had failed, I was not unimpressed by Weld's speech. Arthur Axmann.
Article 1 of the Act describes the transfer of legislative powers from Parliament to the Cabinet. The legislative and executive branches become one. Parliament has virtually abolished itself.
Meine Herren, seit dem 30. Januar hat sich in Deutschland eine Umwälzung vollzogen, die in unserer Geschichte einst mit Recht als die nationale Revolution bezeichnet werden wird. Dass ein solcher geschichtlicher Vorgang wie jede Kampfhandlung hier und da auch von bedauerlichen Erscheinungen begleitet ist, liegt auf der Hand.
He overrode the Constitution with the Constitution, and thus won the fight for unlimited power in the first and decisive round. Lutz Graf Schwerin von Krosigk, Finance Minister.
Anyone who did not fight against the Hitler state effectively served it. Esther, Countess of Schwerin, East Prussian landowner.
I, as a natural coward and endowed with an excruciating imagination, kept my mouth shut. Marie-Louise Kaschnitz, writer, notes.
People cling to life. You could certainly go along with it, but you could also keep a low profile and become invisible. Alda Schäfer, writer.
Letter from prison, June the 7th, 1933. You know that imprisonment doesn't depress me at all. What could I really do outside at the moment? Shrug off the sad looks of the workers with a humiliated heart and sagging shoulders, and tell them that I cannot change it either? It's better to be outwardly unfree, and inwardly face the future with a proud soul. Julius Leber, SPD member of the Reichstag.
The first improvised concentration camps are run by the SA and are then taken over by Himmler's SS, thus creating the SS state. At the Nuremberg Victory Rally in early September 1933, SA Chief of Staff Ernst Röhm is the most prominent party leader after Hitler and clearly his right-hand man. Röhm shows his loyalty to Hitler in public. Privately, however, he criticizes Hitler severely for his policy on the German army. Thanks to his instinct for power, Hitler is willing to believe the rumors spread by opponents of the powerful head of the SA that the leaders of the SA, with its 4 million members, are planning a coup.
Diary, Berlin, June the 24th, 1934. Politically, it stinks. Nobody knows why exactly. A power struggle is impending between the SA and the SS. Erich Ebermeier, writer.
The differences of opinion between Röhm and Hitler, especially concerning the issue of the German army, escalate. Before the SA leadership, Röhm finally calls for the German army to be included in his command.
Diary. Sunday, July the 1st, 1934. Mutiny of the SA leaders in Munich, with Röhm at its head. Hitler himself helped arrest the gang and had them shot. Henrietta Schneider.
On July the 2nd, Hitler announces the official end of the purge in which between 150 and 200 people were shot.
Röhm was one of the last victims. He was shot on July the 2nd, 1934. Hans Frank, Bavarian Minister of Justice, Reich Legal Director.
To crush the alleged revolt by Röhm, Adolf Hitler uses the services of the SS, whose leaders have already brought the police almost entirely under their command. The SS, which was formerly still affiliated with the SA, is rewarded for its murderous service. On July the 20th, 1934, Hitler decrees,
"In view of the great services of the SS, particularly in connection with the occurrences of June the 30th, 1934, I hereby promote them to a self-contained organization within the NSDAP." Adolf Hitler.
With that, Hitler has forged the decisive weapon of his state. The SA becomes a kind of folklore club for the NSDAP.
Hitler swore that only 77 people had been executed. It had been unavoidable that some were shot by accident. Like a certain Willy Schmidt in Munich, for example. The SS were in a hurry to shoot the first Willy Schmidt they could find, without court proceedings. You have to consider how many Willy Schmidts there were in Munich. Fridolin Wagner, granddaughter of Richard Wagner.
Diary, Berlin, August the 1st, 1934. At lunchtime, we drove to the Halensee baths. People are friendly and peaceful. Even the young people seem well behaved here. The Berliner Zeitung newspaper published a bulletin at 8:30 this morning. Condition deteriorating, pulse weaker. So the end is near. This death does not come at a good time. Erich Ebermeier.
The newspaper reports the following about the death of Hindenburg. The government has enacted the following law that is hereby announced. The office will be merged with that of the Chancellor, which means all authority of the President goes to the Führer and Chancellor Adolf Hitler. Karl Windschild, retired pastor. Ballenstedt Diary.
Diary, Wednesday, October the 17th, 1934. A law has been made. Hitler will remain the leader of the German people for life. Henrietta Schneider.
The magic formula, the Führer has ordered. The Führer wishes. The Führer accepts. The Führer forbids, or the Führer authorizes, became the completely new, legitimized method of authority to issue directives that nullified all existing forms of state life in Germany. Hans Frank.
Arrived in Munich around 8.
and went to the Hofbräuhaus, which was very interesting. Hitler seemed so popular here, as Mussolini was in Italy. John F. Kennedy, student, traveling in Europe, diary.
At first, what surprised me was that most Germans, as far as I could see, didn't seem to mind that their personal freedoms had been taken away, that so much of their splendid culture was being destroyed, or soon became aware, to be sure, that in the background there lurked the terror of the Gestapo and the fear of the concentration camps. The vast majority did not seem unduly concerned with what had happened to a few communist, socialist, pacifists, defiant priests and pastors, and to the Jews. William Shirer, correspondent to the Universal News Service in Berlin.
Departure for Cologne via Frankfurt. All towns are very attractive, showing that the Nordic races certainly seem superior to Latins. The Germans really are too good. John F. Kennedy, diary.
I had to think a lot about the comments of an ordinary middle-aged Berlin woman. She said she went to all the ceremonies and stood near the front rows where the Führer walked by, but she was never able to see him because whenever he came near, her eyes filled with tears. Erich Kort, Department Head, Foreign Ministry.
Hitler seemed modest, middle class, rather dull and self-conscious, yet with this strange tenderness and appealing helplessness. Martha Dodd, daughter of U.S. Ambassador William Dodd.
In private, and we as personal bodyguards belonged to his private life, he was uncomplicated. Rohush Mish, SS Bodyguard Regiment.
Simple lower middle class life was not hard for him. It attracted a lot of empathy. It gave him a lot of credit for other unpopular decisions. Otherwise, his simple manner also had clear political intentions. He often emphasized,
if I'm simple and unpretentious, then my surroundings have to be pompous. That way, my simplicity appears even stronger.
Albert Speer, the Kranzberg Protocol.
Goering, who'd become fat and out of shape, seemed ridiculous in his fantasy uniforms and his love of medals and decorations. His greed for earthly goods turned him into a crook. Robert Coulondre, who served as an ambassador to Berlin in autumn 1938, wrote that of all Hitler's sinister buddies, he was still the best. Paul Stellin, Air Force attaché in the French embassy in Berlin.
It has been suggested many times that Hitler had unwavering faith in his old comrades. As far as the Reichsmarschall was concerned, this assumption is true, unfortunately. Heinz Guderian, commander of the 2nd Tank Division.
For the rest of the evening, he told jokes about Goebbels and Goering.
Do you know the difference between Goebbels and Goering?
He asked, and when nobody could answer, he solved the riddle himself.
Goebbels is the maximum amount of nonsense a man can utter in 1 hour, and Goering is the maximum amount of sheet metal a man can hang on his chest.
Friedelind Wagner.
Berlin, November 1937. In November, the hunting exhibition was opened by Reichsmaster Hunter Goering. Strong foreign participation contributed to its success, causing a sensation in Berlin and impressing the visiting guests from all over the world. Our French countrymen came in droves. Paul Stalin.
He condemned the elegant passions of his lofty colleagues, like hunting or horse racing. These were the last remnants of the feudal rule of the princes. He made fun of them a lot. Albert Speer.
Hitler's evil spirit was Goebbels. Ernst Hanfstengel.
On the same evening, I saw Goebbels for the first time. A small man with an overly big head on a child's body. He was surprisingly ugly. His defect, he has a club foot, barely lessened the antipathy that he aroused. He was, however, very intelligent, and after Hitler, the best public speaker in the party. Paul Stalin.
I couldn't care less what people think, and I'll say this openly. Goebbels was an interesting man. I never disliked him. He was only dangerous towards the end. Sarah Leander, Swedish singer and actress.
He was capable of recognizing the faults and weaknesses of the National Socialist system. But he wasn't courageous enough to point these out to Hitler. In front of Hitler, he was like Göring and Himmler, a little man. Heinz Guderian, Major General.
Speech in Munich, March the 14th, 1936. With the confidence of a sleepwalker, I am following the path marked out by destiny for me. Adolf Hitler.
Diary, Sunday, March the 16th, 1935. In the evening, we heard a proclamation to the German people by Dr. Goebbels. In answer to the adoption of 2-year military service in France, Hitler has introduced compulsory military service in Germany. Jubilation in Berlin. Henrietta Schneider.
Interview with Ward Price, correspondent for the Daily Mail, January the 17th, 1935. I know the horrors of war. No gains can compensate for the losses it brings. I have seen that war is not the highest form of bliss, but the contrary. I have witnessed only the deepest suffering. Hence, I can quite frankly state, Germany will never break the peace of its own accord. Adolf Hitler.
I saw a sign on the shop door. Dogs and Jews not allowed. Edgar Feuchtwanger.
Diary, Sunday, September the 15th, 1935. On the radio tonight, they're announcing the outcome of today's resolutions in the Reichstag, that is to say, the laws that the NSDAP deputies have agreed on, the anti-Jewish laws. Marriage between Aryans and non-Aryans is forbidden. Karl Windschild, retired.
Ich schlage nun dem Reichstag die Annahme der Gesetze vor, die Ihnen Parteigenosse Reichstagspräsident Göring verlesen wird. Hinter allen 3 Gesetzen steht die Partei und mit ihr und hinter ihr die deutsche Nation. Eheschließungen zwischen Juden und Staatsangehörigen deutschen oder artverwandten Blutes sind verboten. Unser Führer im Retter und Schöpfer siegt alle!
Diary, Berlin, December the 10th, 1935. The Genetic Health Act, or Sterilization Law, has been passed and envisages extensive examinations and tests for engaged couples before they get married. If things continue like this, we'll soon have a race of supermen. So far, there is no sign of this happening. Erich Ebermeier.
Before the end of Culture Week, I was once again in an aeroplane. And even from the air, I could see the mass of people inside the party buildings on Zeppelinfeld. On the way back from the airport, the boiling heat of this uniformed public festival suddenly enveloped me. Marching music, columns of men, swirling dust, swastika flags in all possible and impossible places, and the pavements brown with people. Paul Otto Schmidt, Chief Interpreter at the Foreign Ministry, experiences.
The march past took 4 hours. He held his right arm out in the Nazi salute for literally the entire time. Afterwards, I asked him how he was able to do that. His answer? Willpower. Neville Henderson, British Ambassador to Germany.
Each time I noticed how enchanted people looked, their faces full of near-biblical devotion when they saw Hitler. As if delirious, they stretched out their arms and greeted him with screams and shouts of Heil. Paul Otto Schmidt.
Over the years, the procedures at the Nuremberg rallies are canonized. The form, as Hitler expresses to Albert Speer in a debriefing of the party convention in 1938, must be an irreversible ritual for as long as he lives. Canonization would provide his potential successor with Hitler's borrowed charisma and become a liturgy of the Third Reich.
On Friday, the 11th of March, 1938, Austrian radio broadcast a program of light music. It was 7:45 in the evening when the announcer suddenly interrupted. The Chancellor was going to speak. Kurt Schuschnigg said that in order to avoid bloodshed, he would capitulate to Hitler's wishes. He ended his speech with the words, "God protect Austria." Dr. Edward Bloch, the Hitler's family doctor, written in US exile, March the 15th, 1941.
Apart from his resolve to bring all Teutonic races into the Reich, as so plainly described in Mein Kampf, Hitler had 2 reasons for wishing to absorb the Austrian Republic. It opened both the door of Czechoslovakia and the more spacious portals of southeastern Europe to Germany. Winston Churchill, The Second World War.
If it is still claimed today that Hitler occupied Austria against the will of the Austrians, that doesn't coincide with my observations. Fritz Wiedemann, Adjutant to Adolf Hitler.
Hitler's speech from a balcony of the Habsburg Palace. As Führer and Chancellor of the German nation and Reich, I report before history the entry of my homeland into the German Reich.
On March the 25th, 1938, Hitler begins the last election campaign of his life. Hitler wants to confirm the annexation of Austria in a referendum. He estimates 80% will vote in favour of it in Austria. He's more than surprised when on the evening of April the 10th, the referendum results are announced. 99.75% have voted for the Anschluss, more than in the Old Reich.
He's really very lonely. Doesn't have any luck with women. He's too soft with them. Women don't like that. They need a man to lord it over them. Joseph Goebbels, Diary.
In October 1938, Willy Forst shoots Bellamy in the IFA studios in Berlin.
Speech to the Nazi Women's League in Nuremberg. There was a time when liberalism fought for the equal rights of women, but the faces of German women, of German girls, lacked hope. They were gloomy and sad. And today we see countless beaming, laughing faces. Adolf Hitler.
He knew that he could have any number of women. He refused because he didn't know, as he said jokingly, whether they favored him as a Reich Chancellor or as Adolf Hitler. Albert Speer.
As for Eva Braun, no one outside the inner circles of the party and the SS knew of her until the last year of the war. Charles Bewley, Irish Envoy Extraordinary to Berlin, 1933 to 1939.
Privately, Hitler was very nice. Eva Braun loved him very much, and he loved her. Hertha Schneider, friend of Eva Braun.
Diary, November the 18th, 1934. I don't want it to be my fault if he doesn't like me anymore. Eva Braun.
For several months in the years 1934 and 1935, Eva Braun keeps a diary. The diary includes the period when she attempts suicide, probably to get Hitler to commit to her.
Diary, March the 11th, 1935. If only I'd never met him. I'm in despair. I'm buying sleeping powders again. He only needs me for certain purposes, nothing else is possible. When he says he loves me, he means it only at that moment. Eva Braun.
That was when Eva Braun attempted her first suicide. This act of desperation moved Hitler deeply. Christa Schröder, Hitler's private secretary. Politically, she had no idea. You often heard Eva Braun complaining,
I don't know anything. Everything's kept secret from me.
Hitler had got used to his girlfriend's character, but he didn't give in to everything she wanted. She was subject to a lot of strict rules. When she danced, she did so secretly because Hitler disliked dancing. Christa Schröder.
The efforts my wife and I made to encourage Hitler to take private dancing lessons weren't crowned with success.
No,
he said categorically.
For a statesman, dancing is an undignified activity. All of these balls are purely a waste of time. And besides, the waltz is far too effeminate for a man. It's exactly this waltz mania that made me hate Vienna so much, and how it contributed to the downfall of the Habsburg Empire.
Ernst Hanfstaengl, from 1937 in exile.
Hitler maintains his publicly Spartan lifestyle in surroundings of not inconsiderable luxury. In addition to his private apartment in Munich, he also has a residence in the Alps on Obersalzberg. Unnoticed by the public, he builds up a fortune worth millions.
I don't have any stocks. I don't own shares in any company. I don't earn dividends. Adolf Hitler in the Krupp Works, Essen, March the 27th, 1936.
The Reich Finance Ministry declares that Hitler is no longer obliged to pay taxes due to his constitutional position. And as of 1934, Hitler no longer does so.
When he had to make big decisions, he went up to Obersalzberg. Here, life was geared to his personal needs. Strolls around Obersalzberg, stopping in small guest houses, gave him, as he said, the inner peace and confidence to make the decisions that surprised the world. Albert Speer.
He didn't drink a drop of alcohol, never ate meat, didn't smoke. His asceticism was real and not artificial. Hans Frank.
One of those present asked his personal physician whether the health of the Reich Chancellor forced him to keep such a strict diet. And he answered that his Spartan habits were mainly for psychological reasons. Gustav Mannerheim, Finnish Field Marshal.
Incidentally, the Führer tried to spoil the meat-eaters' enjoyment of their meal. Although he didn't want to convert anyone to vegetarianism, he suddenly began talking about how awful it was walking through an abattoir. Gertraud Traudl-Junge, Hitler's private secretary.
Enjoying meat, he said, triggered a desire for alcohol. And then again, alcohol stimulated smoking. And this was how one vice led to another. Nicotine was, in his opinion, even worse than alcohol. He actually toyed with the idea of totally banning smoking throughout Germany. The campaign would start with a skull and crossbones printed on the cigarette packet. Christa Schröder.
Hitler is driven by the notion that he will only be granted a short life.
My personal last will and testament. Berlin, May the 2nd, 1938. In the case of my death, I dispose that my remains be buried in the right-hand temple of the Eternal Guardhouse. My coffin should resemble the others, that my entire estate be left to the party. To Fräulein Eva Braun, Munich, a lifelong allowance of 1,000 marks per month. To my sister Angela, Dresden, a lifelong allowance of 1,000 marks per month. To my sister Paula, Vienna, a lifelong allowance of 1,000 marks per month. To my stepbrother Alois Hitler, the lump sum of 60,000 marks. To my trusted Julius Schaup, the lump sum of 10,000 marks and a lifelong monthly pension of 500 marks. I appoint the Master of the Treasury as executor of this testament. In the case of his death, Martin Bormann. Adolf Hitler.